Welcome to Positive Recovery MD. If you're listening, chances are you want to create happiness around you and thrive in your life. We're glad you're here and you've come to the right place. This podcast will inspire and motivate you to not merely survive your recovery journey, we'll give you the tools to build or strengthen your foundation to thrive and flourish in your life. Each week, we'll come together as a community to have authentic conversations around addiction, recovery, and what matters. Growth and progress, not perfection. All while developing positive habits for you to utilize in your life. To learn more, please visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to receive the daily positive interventions that we'll review, as well as gain access to exclusive Positive Recovery content available only to Positive Recovery MD listeners. All right, let's get started.
Jason Powers here, along with Julie DeNova, co-hosts of Positive Recovery MD's podcast. Before I begin, I do want to share something because I am feeling extremely guilty right now. And that's because our next guest, if I was to depersonify her, I would say she's like a warm hug.
Aww.
So why do I feel bad? Well, I've found that, I don't know if it's because I'm an introvert or I'm bad at faking it or what, but I'm so happy to see you and welcome. And I'm so grateful. And what I did was I popped my head in the studio and said, hi, I'm not talking to you till Julie gets here. And I did that last week too, because I can't say, hey, it's so great to see you twice and mean it. I just don't know how to fake it. So
We love that you're so authentic with that.
And I just make up you're an avoidant attachment from a long time ago. And so I just expected that.
If you haven't guessed, our guest is a therapist. She's a doctor, as a matter of fact. And I'm going to read her bio because I want you guys to get a flavor for what she does. But I can tell you that it's really not going to do justice. And as an addiction specialist, and Julie as an addiction specialist, sort of from the operations side and all that, I mean, we could say that she's probably one of the top 2 child mental health resources that we have, I would say, in this part of the country, if not the whole country. And I'm not going to say the world because, you know, I just don't know anybody from Spain, France, England. And they might outdo you, but I'm really honored to have you here.
Thanks.
They would outdo her in a different language, though, maybe. So in terms of experience, Dr. Collier has been working with adolescents and adults suffering from mental illness, behavior disorders, and substance abuse since 1991. She has been licensed by the state of Texas as a professional counselor since 1999 and counselor supervisor since 2008. Her area of expertise includes adolescent brain development, prevention programming, parent coaching, addiction, family of origin work, and training new clinicians. Dr. Collier created a comprehensive prevention model to teach the neurodevelopmental effects of risky behavior to children, teens, and parents, which was selected for the 2015 Prevention and Education Commendation from the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence. Crystal teaches counseling skills and addiction classes as an adjunct professor. In 2018, she was awarded the Torch Bearer of the Year Award. I need to hear more about that. By the Texas Association of Addiction Professionals and a research fellowship by the Hope and Healing Center and Institute to write a prevention goal guide for parents. In 2019, the Houston Counseling Association named her Counselor of the Year. We're so happy and lucky to have you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, when Julie sat down and we were about to start taping, Dr. Crystal said she just finished a book. And what came up for me was the fact that we've been in quarantine and I've read 6 books. I haven't read a book. I can't remember, like a fiction book. So I thought she finished reading a book and basically she wrote a book. So I'm going to tease you guys because that's going to come later. Because I guess I want to hear a couple things, but I understand that you are in recovery yourself.
I am. My sobriety date is 2/3/89.
Oh my God, that's awesome. Wow.
Just celebrated 31 years.
Oh my God. And what are you? You're like 35 years old. You must have got sober.
Yeah. I just turned 50 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
So I got sober when I was 18 after an overdose.
Okay, I want to hear your story. And I'm sure everybody listening wants to hear your story. So hook us up.
Sure. Well, drinking started at 12 when my parents got a divorce and my mom and I moved. And I thought, I have this brilliant idea. I'm going to take summer school classes to get to know people at this new school I'm going to. But guess who takes summer school classes, right? Like those kids. And then I became one of those kids. And this really cute guy was like, I'll introduce you to lots of friends. Let's go to this party. Took my first drink of alcohol. And I noticed, dude, that discomfort in my own skin disappeared. And I remember feeling pissed at my mom because she hadn't told me that alcohol was good for anxiety, as if that would have been a recommendation, right?
Right.
But that crazy thought came up. And then when I was 16, another really cute guy said, "Oh, you should try shooting up Coke. Like, don't snort it." And so that's when I started shooting up quite a bit. And all the way through 16, 17, up to 18. Always was a really good student, kept taking summer school. So by the time I was 17, I graduated from high school. I went straight into college. And I, of course, graduated to bigger and better drugs, older dudes, lots of riskier behavior.
Hold on. What's bigger and better? And I know you're saying that facetiously because it's not actually better, but if you're shooting up cocaine, where do you go from there? You 8 balls?
8 balls.
Yeah.
That's exactly where I went. See, great minds think alike, and addicted minds think alike.
Which is
right?
a combination of heroin and cocaine. So you have the right amount of euphoria and stimulation, and not really the right amount. It's deadly. You could die.
Yeah.
But what goes on in the mind is, well, you know what? Heroin makes me feel really good, but I get the nods.
Yep.
And cocaine can help with that. Now, cocaine's side effect is, anxiety and jitters and stuff. Well, guess what counteracts that? However, you're lucky to be alive because whenever you mix those, the chance of having a heart attack, stroke, and of course, addiction and all the other consequences that go with that, it's a horrible thing. But it's funny how addicts think. Unbelievable.
So another not so cute guy who was a little bit more burned out said, "Oh, let's go down to Mexico. I have this source who will get us synthetic morphine called Nubane, if I remember correctly." And so I would shoot up Coke to get up in the morning and to go to work and to go to school. And when came home, I would shoot Nubane in my butt or my arm. And really the downfall came when I mainlined it. And that's when I went to sleep, and people, thank God, were there and noticed that my breathing was really shallow.
Right.
And so they called and I got help.
So how old were you where you were going to school and working?
18.
Oh my God. Where were you going to school?
I was going to school at Corpus Christi's community college.
And working?
As a waitress at a local restaurant. And then I got a really good job delivering drinks at a nightclub.
At 18?
At 18.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so where were you when you stopped, or when your breathing was shallow and you were recognized and sort of ushered to help?
I was at just an apartment that my roommate and I had.
So you were living there on your own?
I was living there on my own. Yeah, I was independent for about a year. I left my mom's when I was about 17, much to her chagrin. She didn't know what was going on and barely heard from me a lot. But then the next day after that happened, I called her. I knew, I had this moment of clarity that I knew I needed help. So I called her. She came right over. And I have this horrible memory that I wish I could forget, but don't ever want to forget, of opening my arms and seeing the look on her face. Makes me sick just to recall it. The look of disgust and terror in her eyes. I could see both of it, Oh,
I know that look. Like you, it is something I wish never happened, but God forbid I forget. So I want to back up a little bit. You're 18. You're clearly on something. I know what's going on. I'm sure the Nubane is affecting your cardiovascular system, your pulmonary system in a bad way since it hit your vein and you had a high concentration of it. But I'm surprised they let an 18-year-old go who presented in respiratory distress and, with the toxicology report being positive. How did you call her from the hospital, or it sounded like you were home?
I was home by that time. Yeah, I was in
bizarre.
and out. Yeah,
that is so bizarre to me.
Well, I think ERs don't know what to do, right? A lot of times.
This was back in 89, so maybe that was a little different back then. I don't know.
No, so today I would understand that because there's a push to just treat and street everybody. And we send people who are in distress and very little happens, unfortunately. Back then, it was still sort of the end of the heyday of managed care, and people had long admission stays in 89. This was before I was a doctor. Even when I was an early doctor, there was long admission stays. People were there for...
I just feel like doctors sometimes don't know to ask the right questions, though. Even in emergency room setting, sometimes it's leading too. You don't drink that much, right? You're not drinking too much. You're just a social drinker. And meanwhile, the person in the room next to me, I just heard them saying to someone else how much they were drinking. So I think
absolutely no, I didn't think about that. And doctors, at least then, probably avoided the discussion because if you were positive, your insurance wouldn't cover it.
Totally. And I was the queen of being fine. Oh, I'm fine. Everything's okay. Oh, a little sleepy. Oh, just this. And covering, always wore long sleeves. Always never wore sandals because I shot up between my toes. Always covered everything.
But even with all that you were doing, it sounds like you were pretty industrious, right? Like you finished high school early, then you got into college and you were working all while juggling all this.
I mean, I was a straight A student through high school, through all that when I was starting. First semester in college, I had a 4.0. My second semester is when I made the first B I'd ever made in my life. It was devastating. But you can't.
Were you sober then or no?
No, I was still using. It was my third semester that I dropped. And that's when I had the overdose.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Have you been sober since that one?
So February 3rd, 89 is when I got into Charter Hospital in Corpus Christi, Texas. I so wish I had my admissions picture still. Oh, God, I wish I had that picture.
Were you like this?
Oh, yeah. And I was just disgusting looking. But I still have my hospital bracelet still. So I spent 28 days there. Fantastic 28 days. They served chocolate cake, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It was so awesome. I gained the 20 pounds of the 25 that I had lost.
Oh, my God.
And then they said, I had this really sweet doctor who said, what's your plans? I'm like, I'm going to go back to my apartment. I get back. Blah, blah, blah. And he said, but we have a bed open for you in Omaha, Nebraska at this really great halfway house. So now they call them sober living, but then there were halfway houses. And I, in my idiocy, thought, that's on the west or the east coast. And so at first I was not really sure that's what I wanted to do and was really resistant.
Oh yeah, let me sell you some beachfront property in Nebraska.
Yeah. But then I had a really cool spiritual experience that I did not tell anybody about for about 10 years.
Somebody showed you a map?
No. Yeah. And they went, No, I'm glad they didn't because I would have been so embarrassed and humiliated. I wouldn't have gone. But I woke up the next morning and the sun was coming up. I got into the shower and I'm just talking to this God thing that my treatment center told me that I needed to find. And I said, okay, tell me if I should go. And then all of a sudden the bathroom just lit up with sunlight. And I thought, I just had this moment of peace. And I thought, yeah, that's what I should do. So I towel off, I get out of the bathroom and it's pitch black in my room. The sun had not quite come up yet. It was just peaking.
Wow.
It freaked me out.
I thought goosebumps.
I thought I was hallucinating still. I didn't know what was going on. And I literally have not told that story for many years after until I read Bill Wilson had a really similar experience, like a white light kind of experience. And then I thought, okay, maybe I'm not crazy, right? So
he was having DTs, most likely.
Probably. Well, I thought I was too. Maybe I was. But I got a one-way ticket to Omaha, Nebraska. And what I didn't know is back in the 80s, there were no sober living houses in Texas or really the southern states. So when I show up, there are 18 women in this house, all from Georgia, Oklahoma, Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Florida. Our southern accents were so thick that those Nebraska boys did not know what hit them.
And that's important.
Yes. And so then I stayed after I left there and I got my bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Nebraska at Omaha.
So no relapse since?
No relapse since. Thank God.
Let me pose this question to you because I was asked this in my MAP program. The odds are that somebody tries to get sober, has one medical intervention. The odds are very high that they're going to relapse. Mm-hmm. In fact, look at high blood pressure, look at asthma, look at diabetes. With the first medical encounter, you might get some good control at first, but symptoms will come back and then another medical intervention, so on and so forth, helps straighten you out. Like you, I've only needed that one rehab, right? I mean, there were times probably like me, you had moments of clarity during your use, brief.
Yes.
Because there weren't mounting negative consequences yet when you're like, okay, this is not who I want to be, but fuck it. So why haven't you relapsed? Why do you think? Do you ever kind of pause?
Sure. I do that all the time because even today, I was doing a consultation with a sister whose sister is an alcoholic. And I was explaining the neuroscience. As soon as I think about a needle, it's already happening now, my mouth waters, my arms get itchy, my heart starts to race. It's like those neuroreceptors that have been inactive for so many years just open and say, okay, she's thinking about cocaine, talking about cocaine. Is cocaine coming? I think cocaine. Oh my God. I can still feel that sensation. And I just know I'm an addict. Even though I didn't drink as much as I shot up dope. I was 3 years sober by the time I was 21 years old, I was pissed that day. But so there's just been this knowing for me that I'm an addict. And then I always think, if I relapse, what's the bottom? I mean, if I almost died, that's my bottom. So it's scared the crap out of me enough that when I think about that, I've just been able to stay sober.
So you have this reminder that you're not cured. You have it, and you're afraid of the consequences. Okay, I get it.
I feel like a low bottom. Thank God that it's a low bottom, because I think
You OD'd. You were in an ER, right?
Exactly. And if I'm such a intellectual, I think before I feel sometimes, and that's why I escape into intellectualism to cope, that I think if I had a higher bottom, I would have talked myself into using again.
Wow. Okay. I was posed that question, and really I could not think of any better answer than luck or the universe. I don't have that type of physical experience 90% of the time. There are times when I have, and unfortunately, my drug of choice is more, so it really wouldn't matter what you had. So it definitely depends, but I just feel so lucky.
Yeah, me too.
Blessed, anyway.
Well, we're in the 10th percentile, right?
Actually,
less.
So probably, you're probably right. Of the 70% that seek treatment, the ones that stay sober for the first time, 10% probably. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Let me move you to what you do and what you specialize in. Your field is a lot broader than just dealing with kids with addiction. I know you spoke at my daughter's school a couple times. I wish I could have made it. But here's the thing. When I started being a doctor in addiction, I sort of was in recovery and said, I want to be an addictionologist. And I started at the park, and that was it. And then I got these requests to speak. It was okay if I was speaking to adults, but I got asked to speak at schools.
Mm-hmm.
And I was feverishly looking through the literature for what prevention measures were studied. What I could tell parents, there was nothing, absolutely nothing. In fact, the things like DARE or just say no seem to have the opposite effect of increasing use. So I would sort of skate on the edge of not being out of integrity, because I didn't want to say, okay, we have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't have what I'm used to, and that is some science.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what science we have now. How much are you responsible for?
We have great prevention science now, but it is relatively still in infancy. I mean, we're looking at 30, 40 years of literature. So this study for me started in my undergrad in Omaha. And I also this was back in 91. I got my first job in the field. I was a psych tech on a
Me too.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I thought you were in labor and delivery first.
Not first.
Oh, tech, right.
Tech. Mm-hmm. It was the best job. I mean, my job was to cart the kids back and forth to dinner or lunch, take them to group, those kind of things. And we were supposed to have one-on-ones with each kid every day. So I got to do some coaching, and I just loved it. They would put me on the adult unit to give me a break, and I'd be like, I want to go back to the teenagers. And then I got to see what worked with them and what didn't work with them. And so I started studying about that. And then when I got into my master's degree, that's when I moved back to Houston. So I spent my first 6 years of recovery in Omaha. And then I came back to Texas to go to the University of Houston, Clear Lake for my master's in clinical psych. And that's when I started really learning the diagnostic, the pathology of it, and started looking at neuroscience of it. Still not a whole lot of prevention. One of the major pieces back then was risk and protective factors. So they started, looking at data and thinking, okay, those kids, what are their commonalities? And you could see all the risk factors in different areas: community, individual, family, and then protective factors. So that was kind of all we knew. We knew what distinguished the two groups, but how do you put that into daily action?
Right.
That started coming along with things when they started creating prevention programs like DARE. But for a long time, there was no really good way to study a good prevention program. What does that look like? So then the science had to catch up to figure out, how do we study this? Of course, we needed longitudinal data.
Right.
And then the Center for Addiction, which used to be CASA, Center on Substance Abuse and Addiction out of New York, really started publishing a lot of good white papers and looking at longitudinal data. And that's when a really seminal study came out where they had looked at about 16,000 people over a long period of lifespan, from kids all the way into adulthood. And they found that about 90% of people who grow up and get diagnosed with a substance use disorder started engaging in their high-risk behavior when they were teenagers. That's when we started to put together
correlation.
Exactly. And
Right.
the first fMRI study that was done on healthy brain development, it was published in 99, which is the year that I graduated and got my license as a therapist. That was Jay Geed and Gautier's fMRI study where you see the brain grow and develop. We could finally see, the frontal lobe. Around the same time, we started seeing studies popping up about hypofrontality, which you know a lot about, right? And how when the limbic system is full of dopamine, the frontal lobe shuts off. It goes into mobilization mode. So all of these different and of course, genetics was blowing up. But what was going on is none of them cited each other. You'd have all the geneticists doing these amazing studies like reward deficiency syndrome, Kenneth Blum over here, but he's like in this genetics period. And then you'd have the prevention scientists over here looking at this, and then the neuroscience and the addiction.
And developmental.
Yes.
In a whole different.
All
right.
separate. All separate. I mean, I remember in my PhD program, I wanted to study food addiction. And I was reading all these articles that showed the same process in the limbic system and the reward pathway
Right.
for food addiction that they showed for heroin addiction, but they didn't even cite each other.
So when was that? Because I'm aware of studies that showed that the certain dopamine receptors and that are present with people who have a very strong family history of alcoholism also have a propensity to overeat.
Sure. Well, like RDS, the reward deficiency syndrome, Kenneth Blum's genetic stuff.
Right.
His seminal article was published in 94. It was really ahead of its time. But now you see a little bit more information on that. And now
The cross-pollination is
Exactly.
amazing right now.
Right. In the past 10 years, 8 to 10 years, you can see that all these researchers are finally kind of congealing, and we're starting to get the center of the study. I can't remember his name. He's a senior fellow at the Meadows and does a lot of work. Oh my God, I've had a crush on that guy's brain forever, and it makes me mad. I can't remember it. But he started putting it all together and creating this holistic definition of addiction even before ASAM got to it.
Second definition, yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Kevin McCauley. Oh my God.
Oh, Macaulay, right.
So, yes, right. I mean, when I saw him come speak at the council, he put it all together. Like all the different parts of the brain that work together to create what we now know is addiction. It's been brilliant to watch it all unfold in front of me.
So what do you tell parents who are looking for, is there anything I could do
Yes.
to be proactive?
Yes.
Whether or not there's a strong family history.
Sure. Well, and that's what I just finished this book about.
What's it called?
So it's called the Neuro Whereabouts Guide. And it is a guide for parents and families who want to prevent high-risk behavior in their kids. So the first chapter is all about healthy brain development. The second chapter is about how high-risk behavior arrests that brain development. And then chapter 3, 4, and 5 are about 18 different high-risk behaviors. And I put a graph for each one of them to show you when they peak. So when should you as a parent kick in with a prevention conversation? And then what does prevention science say that you can do to support? And this starts with attachment. So as a parent, knowing what a secure attachment is and how to manifest that in your parenting skills is a protective factor against later substance use. And then the second one is communication, actually assertive type of really validating conversation. Communication with your child is another protective factor.
Give me an example of that so our listeners know.
One of my favorite books about this is actually an author here in town, Karen Hall. She runs the DBT Center, and she wrote this awesome book called The Power of Validation. And it affirms kids. In my book, I write about power struggle worms because kids will lay those on you as soon as their brain starts to know how to really argue.
Worms?
Right, power struggle worms. And, when you bite one, they're in control of you.
Oh, hooks. Got
They
like
hook
fishing,
you, right?
yeah.
So a good one is, Mom, everybody does it. Dad, don't you know marijuana is a medicine? It's totally safe. Like those are power struggle worms. And usually parents, what they do is they kick into this lecturing, this arguing, this invalidating, like, you don't know what you're talking about kind of stuff.
Which has the exact opposite
Exactly.
effect, right?
Exactly. So what I teach parents to do is to say, wow, you really feel strongly about this. Tell me more.
Which is odd for a lot of parents because, the gut reaction is to just push back.
They don't want to know more sometimes.
No.
Right.
But by the time your child does that, you've already also worked on attachment, worked on communication. You've worked on your parenting style. So Baumrind has 4 different types of parenting, and we know that authoritative parenting is also protective. Parents who predominantly are in the permissive or authoritarian parenting, those kids that grow up with parents like that grow up to have significantly higher rates of substance use and other risky behaviors.
I thought you said authoritative was protective.
So unfortunately, she named 2 of her styles very similarly. Authoritarian is the disciplinary, the high on limits, low on love. Authoritative is equal. Equal love and limits, right? And then, of course, the permissive, lots of love, but no limits. So, yeah, she has one more category, which is uninvolved, and that's really the abandoning parent. But we know that all 3 of those categories have higher risk for substance use. But authoritative, you can learn how to be an authoritative parent. And one thing that an authoritative parent does is they create a family code. And so they sit down with their kids and say, okay, let's figure out what the values are that we want to espouse in our family and what the things are that we don't want to do. And then really simply, so this is in the book too, a family code activity. They sit down and they put that together in 2 or 3 sentences and they come up with their code. And then they use that code.
How apropos. It's like today's PI.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Good. So like, for instance, my example is in the Collier family, we treat others with kindness, compassion, and respect on and offline. We are upstanders. We don't stand for bullying. We never use drugs, ever, and only alcohol when we're 21 or over. That can be put into a poster with, a cool graphic design of your family and hung in your house. Then you use prevention science data on family dinners. What they know is that the more family dinners that you have, the less high-risk behavior your kids will engage in.
That is so refreshing to hear because I've been saying that for like 15 years. And I was pretty sure it was science-based.
There's science.
Yeah, great.
You were spot on.
Yeah.
Well, what they know is that when you're sitting across from your dad at the dinner table, you don't want to have red bloodshot eyes, right? You know, and you're going to be asking that child.
You're getting FaceTime. You're getting love. You're getting nurturing, and there's reinforcement of. I love this. These explicit family codes. Some people might think, well, of course we stand for those things. We don't need to say it, but if you don't say it, you run the risk of
they don't know.
Yeah, you're missing an opportunity to be preventive.
Yep.
That's so cool.
This is so exciting. We're having so much fun with this conversation, and I love your passion. Like, I'm sitting in the studio just smiling ear to ear.
She really is.
Listening to you talk because it's so amazing. I have to take a picture and send it to both of you. In my bathroom, we have our rules posted and have been posted since I have adult children now. So these have been posted since I moved to Texas. And that was about 14 years ago.
You got to send me a picture
So
of that.
I will, because you're going to be like, oh my gosh.
What a great place to put them.
Exactly like a code. So we missed a few pieces that you just shared, but like very close. So I'm so excited.
Oh my God. Every time you sit down, you look up and see that like all the time. Well, so I teach parents to use that. You don't want to lecture and you don't want to constantly bring it up. But when your child's like going to a sleepover, running out the door, like, hey, I want you to rep our family code. What's a family code? And if your kid goes, oh my God, Mom, the family code is wah, wah. Like,
at least they know it.
They know it. That's good feedback. And then like the first time they go to a dance, that's when you sit down and say, okay, let's review the code. And when you're at the family dinner and you hear about some kid getting in trouble at school for vaping, then you can, slip in, you know what, that wouldn't happen in our family because we have a code. Then when you start randomly drug testing at around age 11, 12, which is a preventative technique.
No way, wait.
Remember I did that to my kids and told them they were getting Target gift cards every time they had a negative. I was buying the Target gift cards. But I said
they hated me.
Work thing.
Yeah.
It was like my fault.
They may hate that, but they will do it with their kids when they grow up. And it's not something that you all the time. You just, when their brain starts to move into what I call phase 2 of brain development, right? When they start growing abstract reasoning and start getting more tempted by high-risk behavior, that's when you say, like, on their 12th birthday, you like give them their presents and then you say, and here's a cup. Like, guess what?
Yay!
From here on out, woohoo! And, once or twice a year, you randomly test them and say, I'm giving you the gift of the number 1 refusal skill. Mm-hmm. So when you go to that party, you can just throw me under the bus. Man, my dad drug test me. I've actually had kids who used, and I got their parents to put them on a very strict drug testing schedule. And this one kid in particular, his parents stopped testing him because he was always negative. 6 months later, relapsed. And he's like, man, my parents stopped testing me. And I went to this party once and this cool kid was there and he passed me the joint and I just couldn't say no. And I said, what if they'd been drug testing you still? He said, man, I would have been able to throw my dad under the bus.
Yeah.
And he did it at a party once. And it was so funny because he said, I got so much empathy. Like all my friends were like, dude, that sucks. I'm so sorry.
Is there... I love your
Dad's
face.
an addictionologist.
I love your face. Oh my God. You could have been, I could have been watching a movie. Just such good acting, so emotive. Is that evidence-based? Is like the drug screening? I know it is once you're caught, say, and I understand it is a sort of, it prevents the next use, but that's like not a primary intervention at that point.
Sure. Well, I've actually looked at as much literature as I can get my hands on about random drug testing. And most of it's at schools. And so I've looked at that. I've also done consulting for schools who wanted to do a random drug testing policy. And I've watched it unfold in the schools that I worked with in Houston. And what the literature says is that, like, if you have a sports team that you start to randomly test, what you see is it has a huge effect on that team. They stop using, they use that as a refusal. Oh no, my soccer coach tests me, I can't. But it doesn't generalize to the rest of the school. But if you test the whole school, you get the same results. Now, it's controversial because students don't like
autonomy.
It. Yeah. But then if you interview them privately, they're like, I'm so glad you drug test. If you look at the whole of the research on random drug testing, you see that it works. It really does work. And what I find though, right? Yes. If you start at 17, they're going to be pissed. They're going to but if you start early at 11, 12 and you just do it once in a while and you keep the conversation up with the family code and you teach them about, like in my book, I have different talks. I have the sex talk, the marijuana talk, the medicine talk, the analyzing ads talk, all that stuff. So you keep the conversation going, once a month, every other month. They know your expectations because of the family code, and you get to reward them when they're negative, when they make good choices. And kids love that. They thrive in that validating environment.
Tell us the name of your book again.
The Neuro Whereabouts Guide.
And where could somebody pick it up and when?
It will be on Amazon in July.
Okay, awesome. Two things. My understanding from science is that kids need role-playing opportunities to be able to say no. Is there any science behind that?
Oh, so much. But here's what I also find. Parents need it too. Like parents need to role play these scripts. I've had parents in my office go, what do I say now to my kid? How do I say this? How do I tell my kid I'm about to drug test them? It's scary.
That's one of the hardest skills, I think, role-playing. And you're sitting across from the queen of role-playing. I mean, she is by far
we could have so much fun.
That would be really fun.
I never want to be opposite Julie. I'm like, oh God, I got this short straw. But so a parent that doesn't really understand what role-playing is, somebody that's listening, like what do you mean by that?
Well, first of all, I never use role-playing. I never say, do you want to role-play? Because people will automatically say, no, right? I'll just say, you be me and I'll be the kid. You just start, right? Like, okay, let's go. What would you say? How would you say that? And let's go. And people always say, oh, thank you for that script. So in the chapter 6, there are scripts for executive functioning, how to talk about this. Because when you keep your kids sober, the frontal lobe doesn't arrest. And so, but you can also increase those skills. The skills of your frontal lobe are executive functioning skills, problem solving, decision making, higher level thinking, empathy, self-control, emotion regulation. And so what I've designed is that this new language for parents, that not only can they use prevention language, but they can also use brain-based praise.
Development language.
Yes.
Yeah, and just so somebody listening may not know exactly all the terms, so the frontal lobe is sort of the last piece of the brain on the block. That is, we share a lot of parts of our brain with other animals, lower animals like reptiles. And so the limbic system, or the emotional center, is kind of where the center of addiction lays, where fear lays. And she said earlier, when that's active, the frontal lobe's cut off. Kids are developing, and their frontal lobe is the ability to see down the road, to be able to stop that impulse. So having impulse control, executive functioning means, not just like math, but also ethics, being able to abstractly reason.
Yep.
More, because they're going to be in a situation down the road where they're not going to be drug tested, say in college. So, they're going to be a 21-year-old brain at 21 rather than, let's say they started using there's other ways that the brain gets arrested, which I know you touched on, but I hope you expound on.
Yes.
And if that happens, let's say they get to college at 18 and then they're 19, 20, their brain might be a 13-year-old.
Yep.
Which in terms of like having empathy, having compassion, having the ability to control your impulses, it's going to be very immature compared to their cohorts.
And if they keep going to 25, that's where they'll peak.
You mean sober till 25?
No. If they keep using all the way up to 20, like if somebody starts using at 13, they get sober at 18, but we take a fMRI of their brain, it's not going to be an 18-year-old frontal lobe, maybe a 13, 14-year-old. But if they relapse and keep using till they're 25, that arrested development is going to stick. Instead of peaking as high as they should, they're going to peak way lower here.
So are you telling me that if somebody uses until, up until 25,
yes,
then for the rest of their life, they're not going to be...
So they're going to have executive functioning skills, but they will be at a percentage much lower than where they should have peaked.
Oh, got it.
Got it?
You don't fulfill your potential.
Exactly.
But if you're able to stop in time for the development to catch up.
I think I'm a good example of that. Well, I hope I am at least. Because I got sober at 18. My frontal lobe had 7 years to catch up. And we know it takes about a year and a half for your brain to unarrest and start to heal. And so at about 19 and a half, hopefully that happened. And because I stayed sober, I was able to grow that part of the brain, all those neuronal pathways for all those executive functioning skills, hopefully crested where they should have.
Yeah, you're doing all right.
Right, yes. But see, whenever I treat adults who have addiction, I always assess their levels of executive functioning. Because if I get an adult, a 40-year adult, and I ask him, when did you start using consistently? And he says 15. I may need to go back and start with the very basic executive functioning skills of emotion regulation, frustration tolerance, self-control, empathy, and train that. The beautiful news is that as you know, we grow dendrites for the rest of our lives. It's the hardware of learning.
Right. Dendrites are nerve cells.
Yes.
Endings.
The endings, the connectors, the things that look like roots and branches that come out. We grow those. Of course, we don't grow them as fast as we do under the age of 25. It takes longer for us to learn and grow those, but we can. And so that's what I think early recovery needs to look like, is bringing people back to basics and learning what they didn't get to learn then. I think when we throw people back into the world without those skills or at least that knowledge, we set them up for a potential relapse or failure.
I totally agree. And I had that in mind when designing the curriculum, the positive recovery curriculum. The way that I approached it was, okay, everybody's got third grade education. I'm just going to assume everybody has a third grade education. And, in education theory, we talk about, or not we, I borrow from other people because I don't do any of that myself. The we, right. Mm-hmm. We talk about lattices. And lattice, if you think of it, it's sort of like somewhere to grab a hold of.
Yep.
And so if I could relate, especially with examples and like appearance. Mm-hmm. So despite everybody telling me not to use Comic Sans font, I do it. It's very approachable. There's images and colors and activities and everything with that in mind, because I know that. And, one of the things that I'm just going to brag a little bit about the curriculum is the relationships piece. Mm. And we know that relationships help recovery from anything, from heart transplants, heart surgery and addiction, or any mental health sort of like intervention. If you have good relationship support,
it's a great dopamine replacement.
Oh God, it's so much more than, yes, but it's so much more than that. Like, there's a Swedish proverb, like, loved ones like double the pleasure and half the misery. Something like that. So, and, forever I was saying, okay, let's work on that support. You need support, but how? So we teach people like active, constructive responding, which when you talked about the parenting styles, the passive one, there's, passive, constructive. Are you familiar with?
Yes.
Yeah. Isn't that wonderful? Because it's exactly like that. It's when you're engaged and you are happy and there in the moment, you feed others. And then, people don't remember exactly what you say. They remember how they felt around you. And if we could
Maya Angelou.
Oh, really?
She
said that?
Yes, she said that.
Awesome. Okay, so this isn't a time to like slow down, put music behind, because I didn't come up with it.
Collective we.
Yes. If people can be more magnetic and have more attractive features for that, then they can have better relationships, and therefore there's a greater chance of them staying sober, which I'm sure you do with your folks.
So when Crystal and I were talking about preparing for this in terms of the Positive Recovery Daily Guide and our positive interventions, she shot me an email and she's like, tell me, I'm not sure about this intervention piece. So it was trying to explain about what a positive intervention is, right? So she doesn't have the book. She doesn't have the whole explanation. She's going to have the book when she leaves
Right.
out of here today. And we're excited to be able to give you that.
Great. Thank you.
So I briefly had an email exchange with Crystal saying that it's an intervention that we use on a daily so that it gives us something to do positively to impact our day. And so hopefully that helped you with the description of the page that I sent you for day 6.
It really did. I called her and I was like, intervention? That word means something else to me.
So real quick, this is what positive intervention is, the tool of positive psychology, like medicine or therapy is a tool for anything, right? So it's just a tool.
Fantastic.
So today, day 6, we're going to start out with the quote from day 6, which is, everyone should try to learn before they die and what they are running from and to and why. And that's James Thurber. And so today we were going to be working on creating our personal mission statements, making sure that it's a purposeful promise that helps guide you in fulfilling your life's potential. It is a unique definition of how you choose to live, much like the code that you were talking about earlier within your family system.
Mm-hmm.
Today you will literally write it, just as you figuratively author, choose your choices, habits, character, and destiny. Every person has the responsibility and gift of deciding how to live and what to stand for. So we were asking you to draft your mission statement, and Dr. Powers as well, and myself did this. We should try to create it in one sentence. It was saying take your time while doing so. Keep writing until you get it down to one sentence. Keep it on your desk, by your bed, or on your calendar. Commit to it and commit it to memory. Your mission statement might grow and change as you mature and develop. You can change it at any time, but always have one. So can you share?
I would love to. This is great timing, too. I just read Daring Greatly, Brene Brown with my book club, and we all had to write a manifesto, which is a very similar, a little bit longer, but I'll make mine a one-sentence one. And I've actually had a mission statement for years that my mission in life is to be radically genuine and to stand up and empower others to make healthy decisions, take care of their brain, and feed their spirit with wholehearted connection with others.
Beautiful.
Love it. That's awesome. Dr. Powers, do you have yours with you today?
I do. Mine's easy because my mission statement I've applied to our organization and Positive Recovery itself. It's to experience the joy of helping others flourish at work, in recovery, in life.
Badass.
That is fantastic. So I have kind of 2 bullet points. One is my motto, more like within my own family system, and that's bringing joy, hope, and love to myself and others, which is really simple. So it's almost like my daily mantra as well. And then within the work or the organization, it's to inspire colleagues and clients to be more than they thought they could be and influence the energy in the room to create possibilities that one just must consider.
Ooh,
Which you do.
nice.
Certainly, that's what we try to do every day for sure. Some days it's easier than others. Sometimes I require a lot more support and love from others as well. Thank you, Dr. Powers, for being there with me today.
You're welcome. My pleasure. My honor.
Each time that we come together, we do set us up for the next positive intervention. So when we close out, I'll certainly bring that up. But Crystal, I would love to know if you'd be willing to come back on. There's a topic that we'd really like to share with folks, and you're one of the Houston experts on gaming.
Oh, yes.
So I would like to maybe do another podcast with you that we can kind of make that just our focus and emphasis for that session.
Sure.
Perfect.
I would really love to. I studied 18 different high-risk behaviors and put them in the book. So it's a great time. I've got some fresh research.
Fantastic. That's good. And I'm excited about your book. July, that was, right?
Yes.
Tell us one more time the title.
The Neuro Whereabouts Guide.
Fantastic.
Are you going to have a brain on the cover?
A brain that's got a map on it with all the different high-risk behavior that you're
It's a good thing you didn't draw a map of the United States.
Notice if for those of you, the audience that's listening, I'm just passing Crystal the Positive Recovery Daily Guide, and there's a brain on it. So something tells me that these two will love and connect over this.
Absolutely. Yes.
So as we go into day 7, the positive intervention is to hunt for the good. Be a flowers at the feet detective. Set an alarm or timer to go off every hour. When the alarm buzzes, pause and write down at least 3 beautiful, positive, gratitude-inducing things you presently see, feel, or are in some way experiencing. Anytime fear or judgment challenges you, choose instead to focus on what is right within yourself and your friends, family, and station. I guess that's unit or station. When a negative thought or criticism arises, exchange it for a positive one. Although things do not always happen for the best, it is always possible to find the best in what's around. And the quote is an Albert Schweitzer quote. In the hopes of reaching the moon, men fail to see the flowers that blossom at their feet.
So this is one of the most challenging days for me because the thought of looking down and being grateful for flowers at my feet, my instinct is like, ugh. It's like, come on, you've got to be serious. But whenever I do
flowery?
A little bit for me, but and I wrote the book.
Yeah,
but I could tell, I got some help on this day with Alana. It sounds like her, but it is savoring, right? And it's one of those things that when practiced, not every day, obviously, but one of those things when practiced, and I've done this book a couple times, it has a slightly positive effect on me. I mean, I'm not one of the most joyous people on the outside all the time, so this is a challenge, but it works. So if you're, if you hear that like I hear it, do it anyway. All right. So thanks again, Dr. Crystal Collier. Phenomenal guest. Thank you.
Dude, it's been an honor. Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Can't wait to have you back. And this is Powers and Denofa signing off.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Positive Recovery MD. Don't forget to visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to get your daily positive intervention sent straight to your inbox. Be sure to subscribe to Positive Recovery MD on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast to receive an automatic download when a new episode drops. And as always, if you or someone you know needs help, visit positiverecovery.com or call 877-4SOBRIETY, which is 877-476-2743. We are here to help.